Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. I hope this video finds you, this podcast finds you in good health. We're starting a new Go show today called Reply to the Mother of Ueno. This is a woman who lost her husband several years ago. Her husband was an influential part of the management of the town, a government official, if you will. He died just before the birth of her youngest son, and this is a letter written to her on the occasion of her 49th day memorial service for her son, who's now also passed. So there's a lot of stuff going on in Japan at this time, a lot of warring factions. I've repeated this several times. So a lot of casualties. This woman is a follower of Nichiren. She's, I believe, the mother of Nanjo Tokumitsu. So she's a student and a promoter, a lay nun, if you will, of Nichiren's doctrines of the Lotus Sutra practice. And so he's going to go over many things here. This is in deference, number one, to her grief and her losses, both of her husband and of her youngest son, who was born just after she lost her husband. So there's all kinds of weird connections here, I'm sure, in her mind that Nichiren wants to address. And of course, take the opportunity to solidify her strength through the teachings of Buddhism. So, as usual, he starts with a thank you for offerings that she's sent to him in this occasion of the 49th day after the passing of her young son, so that he can be alerted to, or not pleaded to, but asked of Nichiren to perform a memorial service for her son. So this is his reply. I have received the offerings that you've sent for the 49th day ceremony marking the passing of your son, the late Nanjo Shichiro Goro. As noted on the list, they consist of 2 strings of coins, 1 horseload of polished rice, 1 horseload of taros, pounded bean curd, konyaku, 1 basket of persimmons, 50 citrons, and other items. For the sake of your son's repose, I have recited the entire Lotus Sutra once, and the first section of its lifespan chapter several times, and chanted the Daimoku hundreds or thousands of times. So there's a good guidance on memorial ceremonies. Always involves recitation of some form of gongyo and lots of Daimoku, right? The sutra, and she sent quite a lot of stuff, so she's from an important family. The sutra known as the Lotus Sutra is a scripture that has no match among all the sacred teachings of the Buddha's lifetime. And as indicated by its words, quote, between Buddhas, it can only be understood between one Buddha and another. Those at the stage of near perfect enlightenment or below, on down to ordinary mortals, cannot fathom it. This is why Bodhisattva Nagarjuna stated in his treatise on the great perfection of wisdom that persons below the level of Buddha should simply have resolve, and in that way they can attain Buddhahood. So we've talked about this in recent podcasts. I've talked about different ways of using your Daimoku, our Daimoku, to this Nichiren mandala to enliven our personal Gohonzon, our wisdom, our Buddha wisdom, our pathway to our Buddhahood, until you actually experience that excited, awestruck sensation of opening your Buddha mind, you really don't understand how difficult it is to put into words what that experience is like. It is very unique. And so this is what is meant when Shakyamuni says in his sutras, the nature of awakening can only be understood between Buddhas. In other words, if you've experienced it, then you can only describe what your experience was to somebody who's also experienced it. Because otherwise we just chase our tails with words trying to wrap around this experience. It's so other. It's so different to our samsaric, locked in, distinguishing, identifying mental gaze. And the only way to understand it is to reach it. And the only way to reach it is to adamantly chase it down. As Nichiren would say, single-mindedly to fuse with Buddha. Right? In the Teacher of the Law chapter, in the 4th volume of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha states, quote, "Medicine King, now I say to you, I have preached various sutras, and among those sutras the Lotus is the foremost." End quote. In the 5th volume it says, "Manjushri, this Lotus Sutra is the secret storehouse of the Buddhas, the thus come ones. Among the sutras it holds the highest place." End quote. In the 7th volume we read, quote, "So this Lotus Sutra is likewise, among all the sutras, it holds the highest place." End quote. We also read, quote, "This Lotus Sutra, shines the brightest, so that this sutra is the most honored." End quote. In fact, even in a single reading of the Lotus Sutra, you'll come across this various statements where Shakyamuni makes it abundantly clear that the Lotus Sutra is the one vehicle, no other. That this is Shakyamuni speaking of his own enlightenment and how all sentient beings can do exactly that, awaken their own Buddha, their own path to Buddha, this life-mind condition. These passages of Scripture do not represent some doctrine that I have put forth on my own, right? This is not Nichiren's opinion. They are the truthful words of the Buddha, and hence it is impossible that they could be in error. So why is he saying this to this grieving nun? Obviously, still very much a struggle in Japan is this traditional old values of some handed down erroneous views of Nembutsu or Zen or True Word or Pure Land. There's still other schools out there all run by these descendants of erroneous teachings, and they're incorrect. And so, because she follows Nichiren as a student of the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren is once again bolstering her adamant practice in the face of her grief. It's easy to lose confidence in everything when you lose a loved one, right? So certainly a woman losing her husband, and let's remember this is 13th century Japan, so that's no small grief. And now her youngest son, with whom her sons she would have the greatest reliance as men in her family to protect her, right? If someone born a commoner should claim to stand equal to a samurai, he would surely be faulted. And how much more so if he should claim that he is equal to the ruler of the nation, right? You'd laugh in his face, right? or even superior to the ruler. Not only would he himself be punished for such arrogance, but his father and mother and his wife and children would be made to suffer as well. You see, here's this familial line. This is very strong and very potent in 13th century Japan. Not that it isn't today, it's just not as well known today. That family structure, that hierarchy, it isn't really popular in most of the West these days. And I would argue Asia as well. It is like the case of a great fire that burns down houses, or of a great tree that is falling, that in falling brings down the little trees around it as well. It is the same with the Buddhist teachings. People who rely on the various sutras expounded in the flower garland, agama, correct and equal, and wisdom periods, such as the Mahavajracana or the Amida Sutra, regard the one they believe as the best, without distinguishing the relative worth of the sutras. They say, thus they say, our Amida Sutra is equal to the Lotus Sutra, right? Because they don't know any better, they just decided. Or it is superior because somebody told them so, a teacher told them so, right? And you tend to follow your teacher's words. Fellow believers, hearing their own sutra praised in this way, think it is a cause for joy. On the contrary, however, they are committing a serious offense, and the teachers of such doctrines, their disciples, and their lay supporters will fall as swiftly as flying arrows into the lower life paths, right? The lower worlds. They don't understand this, but they're not diligent in their study. They can't tell good from not good. They just follow what they're told and follow the group think. It's a lot like Facebook and misinformation, right? However, those who declare that the Lotus Sutra is superior to all the other sutras are justified in doing so, because it says so in the sutras themselves. These are the words of Shakyamuni Buddha. So if all you do is take responsibility for studying so that you know what you're doing, then you figure it out for yourself. You don't need to be told. It's very obvious. In fact, they will enjoy great benefits. This is because their declaration accords with the sutra itself. They're practicing in accord with Shakyamuni's direction of the one vehicle practice, Myoho Rengekyo. And this is all Nichiren is trying to do in his age, in his life, is redirect people to the obvious truth. But, you know, old ways and rituals and so on and so forth, they hold a lot of sway to ordinary beings, right? Unenlightened mortals. Prefacing the Lotus Sutra is a work called the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra. It is like the vanguard of generals who go before the procession of a great king to quell disturbances. The Immeasurable Meaning Sutra states, quote, in these more than 40 years, I have not yet revealed the truth, end quote. These words are like the great bows that the generals carry to drive away the king's enemies with bows. Bows. These words are like the great bows that the generals carry to drive away the king's enemies with arrows, or the swords with which they cut those enemies down. They're clearing a path, right? They are like a royal proclamation, sharp as a sword, directed to the members of the Flower Garland School who read only the Flower Garland Sutras, the priests of the Precept Schools with their Agama Sutras, the Nembutsu believers with their Meditation Sutra, and the True Word teachers with their Mahavajracana Sutra, chastising them for failing to follow the Lotus Sutra and bringing them to submission. This is the Immeasurable Meanings Sutra. And if they bothered to read it and understand it, they wouldn't need Nichiren to beat them over the head with it. They're like Yoshii attacking Sadato, or Yoritomo destroying the forces of Kiyomori. These words of the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, quote, in these more than 40 years, so on and so forth, are the sword and rope of the Wisdom King Immovable, or the bow and arrows of the Wisdom King Craving Filled. When the late Nanjogoro made his way across the mountains of death and the rivers of three crossings, the soldiers who escorted him and repulsed the mountain bandits of earthly desires and the pirates of past offenses, and allowed him to proceed safely to the pure land of Eagle Peak, where these words of the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, quote, in these more than 40 years I have not yet revealed the truth, end quote. So now he's talking directly to her deceased son. And he's saying that because of his student, being a student of the Lotus Sutra, he certainly attained his Buddha in death, in his final moments. Certainly he did in his lifetime, but certainly in those final moments, he was completely released from these samsaric condition. The Expedient Means chapter in the first volume of the Lotus Sutra states, the world-honored one has long expounded his doctrines and now must reveal the truth, end quote. It also says, quote, honestly discarding expedient means, I will preach only the unsurpassed way, end quote. In other words, Shakyamuni is saying now with this sutra, with this sermon, this Lotus Sutra, I'm no longer teaching you how to get your brain right so that your mind can perceive the way to Buddha. I'm now going to teach how I did it, what it's like, what it is that the law is, the opening door to all beings attaining Buddha. This is what it looks like. This is how it's done. Myoho Renge Kyo. So it's the unsurpassed way. In the 5th volume we read, quote, only the bright jewel that is in his top knot, and so on and so forth. This one jewel exists only on the top of the king's head, end quote. And the way that powerful ruler did when he took the bright jewel he had guarded for so long and finally gave it away. So these are all statements about Myoho Renge Kyo. This is the way to enlightenment. This is the way I, myself, Shakyamuni, Siddhartha Gautama, became Shakyamuni Buddha. This is how I opened that door, that all people could open that door. And I'm freely giving you the path to it. I had to teach for 40 or more years to get you guys to even understand what I'm giving you. The import of these passages is this. The great collection of scriptures has been brought to this country of Japan, numbering 7,399 volumes, and each one of these various scriptures is a follower and retainer of the Lotus Sutra. As I've said many times, they're all preparatory texts. To illustrate, the men and women of this country number 4,994,828, but all are subjects of one man, the ruler of the country. As for the significance of these various scriptures, let me give an analogy that even an uncomprehending woman can understand immediately. He's not calling her ignorant, but he's saying, because she's a woman, she needs to understand that in her own, in other words, it's hard for you, if you're a man, to understand how a woman thinks, her view of the world. And that's a general statement. Everyone's different, of course. But there are certain similarities between you and I. I don't pretend to know how women think about the world, and they're all different. I've known quite a few. So Nichiren is appealing to her as a woman and saying, look, amongst your kind, I mean, we're one kind. Men and women are, there's very little differences between us, but certainly karmically, we think differently. We have different responsibilities to life that are quite distinct. As far as I know, no men have wombs, right? So he's speaking to her because he wants her to take this personally, not to think of this as, yeah, men know this, but it's different for me. He doesn't want her to do that. So he wants to speak to her directly as a woman. Suppose that one is building a great padeta. In addition to the lumber to be used in the padeta itself, one gathers together a large quantity of small timbers and uses them to build a scaffolding 10 or 20 feet in the height. After one has done this, one uses the original lumber to construct the padeta. And when the padeta is completed, one then removes the scaffolding and discards it, leaving the padeta in place. Now, the scaffolding represents the various other sutras, and the great padeta, the Lotus Sutra. When the Buddha preached the other sutras, he was in effect erecting a scaffolding in preparation for the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Quite well put, Nichiren. In the same manner as the sutra describes when it says, quote, honestly discarding expedient means, end quote, persons who put their resolute mind in the Lotus Sutra should first cast aside and fling away the Namu Amida Butsu invocation based on the Amida and other sutras, their scaffolding. The teaching of the True Word School based on the Mahavajracana and other sutras, and the 250 precepts of the Precept School based on the Agama Sutras and other teachings, and then they should embrace the Lotus Sutra alone. When one is preparing to build a great padeta, the scaffolding is of a great importance. But once the padeta is completed, then the scaffolding is removed and thrown away. This is the meaning of the passage about, quote, honestly discarding expedient means, end quote. Where are we time-wise? Though the scaffolding is necessary to complete the padeta, no one would ever dream of discarding the padeta and worshipping the scaffolding. And yet the people who seek the way in the world today spend their whole lives reciting Namu Amida Butsu only and never once chanting Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. They are like persons who discard the padeta and worship the scaffolding. They are examples of the secular saying, quote, seemingly wise but actually foolish. The late Shijiro Goro, her son, did not take after other people in Japan today. Though still a youth, he followed in the footsteps of his sagacious father, and at an early age, having not yet turned 20, he began chanting Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, and thus he became a Buddha. This is what the sutra means when it says, quote, then not a one will fail to attain Buddhahood. I hope that if you, his loving mother, are thinking with longing about your son, you will chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo and meditate to be reborn in the same place as the late Shijiro Goro and your husband, the late Nanjo. The seeds of one kind of plant are all the same. They are different from the seeds of other plants. If all you do, If all of you nurture the same seeds of Myoho Renge Kyo in your hearts, then you will be reborn together in the same land of Myoho Renge Kyo. When the three of you are reunited there face to face, how great will your joy be? So again, I keep reminding you of this, but it's easy to get lost in the rhetoric of these teachings. But understand that when we chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, you and I, we immediately belong to the same club, the club of Buddhahood. It's instantaneous. We may have trouble experiencing it in our samsaric reality, and this is why we chant repeatedly and we use this mandala to enliven that perspective, that realization. That realization is there always, but our samsaric reality, our mind of attachments, is very, very powerful, and it occupies all our attention. The monkey mind. So, although our Buddha nature is already there, we tend not to see through it as our lens, if you will, of life experience. It's there, but we're preoccupied with all this other dancing crap. Right? So it's not that by chanting we'll suddenly reach out into some magical space and draw Buddha awareness from it. It's already here. It's already in our experience. We touch it in odd ways, in different ways, through different experiences. But to actually be in that mind, to experience each moment in samsara, that is a difficult thing. And that's what this practice is all about. Opening that eye. You hear this statement, the Buddha eye. It's a mental cognition. Our perception changes. You ever been to the optometrist? If you haven't, they have this gadget where you put your nose in the middle of it, and it's a couple of lenses, and you have to close one eye or switch eyes, but the optometrist will change the lenses and ask you, is the letter on the chart more clear or less clear? More clear or less clear? Well, it's kind of like that, if you want. It's like our samsaric vision is all blurry and attached to all this stuffness. But when we chant, we flick this lens where everything becomes crystal clear. And our attachments are completely removed. And we just see, we experience without attachments, without delineations. And we just experience the wonder of this experience. It's like that flick of that lens. Is this clear? Is it not? Is it enlightened or samsara? But that lens it's already there. The optometrist didn't pull this magically out of the air and go, now do you see? No, it's already manufactured. It's already there. Just that we haven't set our eye to it. Right? Should make you all the more motivated when you're sitting in front of your Nichiren mandala and chanting to look directly at the mandala and see the reflection of your own Buddha mind. Demand it. Right? Now, when we open the Lotus Sutra and read what it says, we find these words. The thus come one will cover them with his robe, and they will also be protected and kept in mind by the Buddhas who are now present in other regions. And that's a big clue. This sounds like far-off spaces and other personages, but what it means is that we all are Buddha. And that when we realize this Buddha mind, this Buddha lens, this Buddha eye, we are instantly of one mind, Buddha mind, all living sentient and insentient things, all phenomena. That's overwhelming to a samsaric person. But to Buddha, it's expansive. There are no separations. There are no distinctions. There are no identities. There's simply awareness at a I shouldn't even use that word awareness, because samsarically we all just defined what that means. Right? This is why we can't discuss what Buddha is like until we ourselves awaken it. For a moment, for several moments, for extended period of time. Imagine living day to day in that awareness. Right? So I'm going to take a break at this point. The meaning of this passage is that the Buddhas of the 10 directions will all assemble in throngs and fill the lands to the east, west. It's what I just said. He's just saying it in very colorful terms, right? So we'll continue with this in part 2. In the meantime, I just want to thank you again for being here. Don't forget to download the podcast if you like to just listen to them, the Buddhahood podcast. Thank you for your support, all you guys on Patreon and you others who just occasionally send in contributions. Words fail me. Thank you so much. So proud of your practice. Keep going. Stay healthy so that you can continue to practice and awaken that Buddha mind, right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. One of these days I'll get my school finished. I'll invite all of you from Australia, the UK, not Croatia, well, Croatia, of course, but I was thinking somebody who connected with me from, what's that other country? Estonia, Canada, all over the map. This Sangha reaches worldwide. So to all of you, thank you, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Bye for now. Hey, thank you for being here. Did you know there's a third way you can help support this channel, and it won't cost you a cent? Yep, if you are not able to be a patron on Patreon or use the PayPal me at .com at Sifu Sylvain, because you don't have the financial fortune to help support this channel right now. You, as I say, always support this channel by watching, but you can also help us grow so that maybe one day we can get over 10,000 subscribers and YouTube will grace us with monetization. It's not a lot, but if you can make sure you're subscribed and share a video, like a simple one, just go into the search criteria and type monk, and you'll have a video that'll come up that's been up for years about what is a monk. You know, it's called monk, who, how, where, something like that. That might be a great introduction to somebody who doesn't understand what a monk is to begin with. It's a tool. Use this channel as a tool to help you with your bodhisattva practice, and share a video to somebody who you think, oh, I know somebody who'll benefit from watching this. And in that way, you can help us grow. And that's a really good way to help your practice along as well. So just wanted to drop that in on you in case that's something that you might find useful. Take care of yourself again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.